Episode 027 of the Bit Beacon broadcast. It's March 18th, 2024.
Ravenheart's here.
Kodak's is here. And since we're recording this episode back to back with the previous, we don't have anything new to talk about that we've been playing, buying, or any events that we've been to. So we're going to jump straight into Ravenheart's Seraphim Weekly Update.
Yep. So this week, last week, I talked about the pause menu and how I was,
It's been a couple of weeks of the pause menu.
Yeah, it has been. And it continues to be.
As we said last week, it's not sexy.
Right.
Work.
It's not at all. So modularizing the pause menu, getting it away from its dependent scripts and able to instantiate on command and then destroy when you unpause.
Mm-hmm.
And then spawn any other additional like data objects like options menu and language. The options menu will have its own children.
So, okay, question. You mentioned language. Is that something you will let people change like mid-game?
Yes. The way I'm setting it up, you will be able to do it mid-stage.
Oh, okay.
You could literally switch to Japanese like halfway through the stage.
Okay, because like a lot of games, like you can only make that setting like maybe at the start screen.
Right.
Or maybe even only when you're like starting the game, period.
So every time I'm loading a text or an audio, voice, Vox, V-O-X, I am referencing the language number.
Okay.
And actually I'm going to talk about this a bit. My audio manager script that I wrote, it pulls, from resources.load, which I talked about a few weeks prior, from whatever folder is containing that language's audio and text.
Okay.
So it's going to basically get told what is needing to be like loaded, and then it's going to reach in and grab that based on the language. So if you switch the language value mid-stage, I'm going to need to do a separate function that changes everything that's already on screen to that language, but after that, like, it's just going to spawn whatever is needed for that particular language.
Okay. By
spawn, I should say load into memory whatever is needed for that language. Same with volume, right? So that same system that I wrote is also going to apply whatever SFX volume and voice volume, music volume you have set.
Oh, okay, because you'll be able to use like a slider or something to customize that.
Exactly. All of this exists, but it's all still pretty new within this modularization.
So there's no like UI stuff for it yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I am building it with what I'm doing with the pause menu right now. But yeah, that's part of the modularization, because in the past in the game, scripts would have like their own reference to their own audio sources. Like the power up script has its power up sound effects and stuff just referenced in that script. That doesn't help me much when it comes to it needs to be centralized.
Okay.
If you're going to have volume control and stuff like that, you're going to need all your audio to be centralized.
Okay.
And so part of my effort here is getting that all done that way. And by loading everything from disk, that's if you're going to have like 5 different languages and stuff, there's no like you have to load all of it from disk. Like you can't have all that sitting like loaded in memory,
right,
pulling what's needed, because you're never going to use Korean or whatever, for a certain player.
Right.
And so, yeah, I have basically, I'm doing this for audio effects. I'm doing it for language, like text, like textures. A lot of my text is not actual text objects. They're textures on screen. So those have a different version for every language.
So real quick, your Seraphim is going to not only have like visual text language represented from multiple different languages,
Right.
but also VO from multiple different languages.
Yes.
Okay.
That's true.
Have you ever like announced that there would be voiceover?
I don't think I have.
Okay.
Well, I mean, voiceover has been in the game.
Right, but has it ever been like seen in a trailer or anything? I'm just trying to say we got a little exclusive here.
Yeah, we might have got exclusive. You're probably right. Yeah, there is limited voiceover in the game. When I say, it's quite a bit of voiceover in the game.
Right.
Every level objective is voiced. Level events like stage complete is voiced. Anytime you pick up a new ability, it's voiced. And then the tutorial elements in the first level are voiced. So that's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of voice. And to get that done, I have solutions. Well, I have a solution for Spanish. You know, the same person doing that voice speaks Spanish, so that's no problem. She speaks a bit of French, and I'm going to see if that's going to work out.
Okay. And aren't there like websites now where
there's voices.com, and I've talked to them about quotes in the past.
Yeah.
It's probably going to cost $2,000
to get everything.
To get like just Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't think there was that much dialogue.
Altogether, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they go by word count.
Oh, okay.
And shoot, I'm trying to think right now. So 24 stage objectives.
Well, because you're not just paying for voiceover, you're paying for translation too.
Correct. Yeah. And
because you don't want machine translation.
Right. No.
It's not ideal.
No, I agree with that. I'm not going to use that. Now, some stuff is like one word.
Yeah.
You know, but even then, I'm not sure if it's giving me the correct context of the word play. You know?
They might have a different word for play that would be better used for that context.
Right.
Yeah.
It might. The word it gives me might have to do with like playing with child's toys.
Yeah.
Which is not what I'm trying to do.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to mess that up.
Right, yeah, I can't mess that up. So no, I'm going to have people doing that stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to have to figure out I have the language solutions has been something I've been thinking about since.
Okay, now like when you play a game and it's in Japanese, like are you like, "Oh, this is cool?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think similarly people in Japan when they hear like English in games, they think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I get that.
I know that like a lot of times in Japan, like let's say Final Fantasy got finally released in North America, right?
Right.
And they localized it with English. Then in Japan, they would like bring it back over as like Final Fantasy X International Edition or something like that, and they would have all the English voices in the game, and people would want to play it, right? Because they thought it's like it's like Hollywood, you know? Like, it's a big deal.
No, I get it. I do get it.
Yeah.
You'd be able to do either.
Yeah.
All the voice in the game.
Okay. I have a question. Can you choose a certain voice but a different text? You might want to consider that. Players like that.
Yeah.
They might want to play with Japanese.
That's getting a little too much. I mean, I'm already doing way more than my quota of language options. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Maybe. That might not be too difficult.
Right.
But that's something I need to consider now. That's what I'm working on. Yeah. What I wanted to talk about, though, is... So I'm continuing with the pause menu, and I'm starting to develop the options menu. And so I'm really just working on layout. That's what I've been doing this week, visual layout, and figuring out exactly what the options are, which I've always kind of known. But that's changed over the years, too. And what order I want them listed in, how I want the cursor to behave with certain options that are like on or off. And I also don't want it to just be a static screen either, like in the past, because turning the time scale to 0 didn't allow for any kind of like animation going on. But I can still do animation, just have it be frame based, not time based. Like I think I described that a little bit last week.
Yeah.
But now I'd like to have some stuff moving on the pause screen, so that it's just not some static thing.
Do you envision like a cursor maybe next to like whatever option you're playing with?
Yeah, it's going to be the same cursor that is throughout the rest of the game's menus, which is the shot from the character, and when you hit confirm, it shoots. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep that consistent. So I'm working on the visual elements of the options menu. But what I want to talk about most this week is kind of just explaining to people what the new structure looks like with the modularization quest that I'm on.
Okay.
So in the past, things were independent of each other. If the player manager needed to talk to the enemy manager, they'd just shoot messages back and forth, which it gets expensive when it's multiple times a frame, every frame, and stuff like that. Now what needs to happen, what I've realized needs to happen, is things need to be centralized, things need to instantiate when needed, and destroy out when they're done, so that what's in memory, what's in the game scene is just what's needed on screen. But centralizing everything is really paramount to achieving this. And so I developed a script called, it's just called Master Reference. And it doesn't have any running code. It just has a bunch of references to everything. So it has a reference to the player manager. It has a reference to the enemy manager, the level manager, the power-up manager, the audio manager, the options, pause menu, all that stuff. So all the manager scripts are all referenced in this one master reference.
Okay.
And so everything that instantiates into the game scene identifies itself to the master reference and gets, both ways. So the master reference gets reference to that. Like, so if an object group like an enemy spawns, it'll get the master reference and it'll give itself to the master reference.
Okay.
The master reference will then take that and put it in the enemy manager. So basically everything's centralized. So everything can just reference the master reference for everything.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So they're all referencing the same thing.
Yeah. So I have this...
Rather than like zigzagging all over the place?
Yeah, so that there's not just unmitigated communication between scripts, but also so that things can, children, if you want to call them, that can instantiate and destroy without anything being interrupted.
Okay.
It's like a top-down reference pyramid kind of thing going on, rather than just everything cross-referenced all over the place.
Right.
This is how it has to be. And this spider web I'm describing of how it's very convoluted at this point, with all 8 power-ups in the game, with all the different shot types in the game, all the different enemy types in the game. It's a lot. It's a lot to untangle. But yeah, so that's kind of the scheme, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah, the master reference...
That's what I'm calling this episode,
by
the way.
Okay. The master reference can just be referenced, and then you have everything. A new script is referencing everything with just one reference.
Okay.
I'm saying reference a lot.
Reference.
So that's kind of the idea.
Okay, so this is just an idea right now?
No, the master reference exists in the game right now. The new level manager exists. The new player manager doesn't. It's still the old player manager.
Okay.
I'm probably going to continue with the old player manager, but there's a lot that needs to happen.
Okay.
And also, triggering functions and sending messages back and forth is a lot easier now. Before, no longer do I have to, find game object with tag, which is an expensive operation if you're doing that a lot.
Okay.
Because that searches through the whole scene for a game object with a specific tag.
So it's like...
instead of doing that, I can go master reference, enemy manager, item, and then send message.
Okay.
More direct, less work for the CPU.
Okay.
Way less, like after everything, after this is applied across the board, way less work for the CPU.
Okay.
I still feel like I'm targeting Vita, I guess. I don't know. Which is sad. It's just sad. Because all of this was...
I mean, we've mentioned this before. All this work maybe isn't necessarily like super necessary given the hardware that you're working with.
Right now.
But like long term, it will benefit you to have this figured out.
Yeah, because this will allow like level editing and stuff to be super quick.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could even probably build like a user level editor with this kind of setup.
With some kind of graphical interface.
Right.
Even for, maybe it might even be easier for you if you had like a graph where you just plug values in and then it just
now
does
it's
exactly
like
what you want it.
I can make a new level and assign every enemy.
Yeah.
Every enemy wave can just be like do like
custom,
old list.
Yeah.
And then it'll play out.
Exactly.
And it's not all random anymore. I'm trying to keep as much random as possible because I feel like that's still the spirit of the game as it existed on mobile and stuff. But I have a random wave script. So I can, So if I want certain enemies to appear to create like a moment where like you have 6 giant enemies and 4 fallen matter go flying and you're supposed to blow them all up.
Yeah.
I can do that very easily.
Okay.
Or I can just plug in random waves all the way down the list.
Right.
And create a level that way.
I mean, that's kind of... I mean, I always imagine, like, the sort of high-score arcade kind of component as being just, like, random.
Right.
You know?
Well, when it comes to the randomization in the game, my goal is to keep the same level of challenge the same, no matter what, so that everyone is getting a fair shot at the leaderboard and stuff.
Right.
So I do have different random waves. Like I have a random wave that's only small enemies, and you know I can say how many, and small enemies and 2 big enemies. You know I can specify that.
Okay.
So that no matter what spawn points, because there's 7 different spawn points, you know those will be randomized, but the amount of small and big enemies will be consistent for every player.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, no one's getting like a fair shake.
Yeah, I mean, because when you have an element of randomness in like an arcade style game,
right,
which is not uncommon in
right.
an arcade style game,
not at all.
Like, you know, you could get people like, oh, well, that person who has the high score just got like really lucky with his random waves or something, you know,
right.
Like I'm way more skilled, but I never got that lucky with, you know,
right. I got 6 enemies where he just got 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I don't want that.
Right.
You know, so I'm trying to eliminate that from happening, but still keep the spirit of random.
That's a delicate balance. I'm
it
sure.
is, yeah. But I think I have that figured out.
Okay.
With this new scheme, if you consider the way it used to be, all 7 spawn points had a pool of enemies, like 6 different enemy object groups that it would just turn on and off. They all exist. They're all loaded in memory. And in some ways that is quick, but not when it comes to loading the level. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And so that's no longer the case. The 7 spawn points are still there, but it's going to instantiate and destroy game object groups like enemies and items as needed.
Okay.
And so now all that's just going to be there is going to be what you need to be in the scene at that moment. But yeah, so that's kind of the approach. So hopefully people can kind of see it in their head a little better and understand better what I'm talking about when I talk about this kind of stuff. So yeah.
That's it for your update?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That was a good update, I think. I think might be our meatiest update yet.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, I am a computer scientist and I'm also not.
Right.
You know, so sometimes I talk about this stuff and I'm good at talking about what I really understand. A lot of it I don't, you know, because I'm still learning and figuring it out. Back in the day, find game object with tag was all I knew. No, it's not. You know, so you know, that contributed a lot to the way things have gone too. But yeah, you know, it is what it is. I don't like the fact that this project.
Okay, I have a question. Do you ever? Okay, so you're making all these optimizations based on what you know now.
Yeah. Yes.
But then,
and no.
like, all right. So, well, let's just say that, yeah, and then, but like, let's say 2 years from now,
I know more.
Yeah, and you're like, well, let me re-optimize the game again.
Yeah. So that at that point, if I have something viable to release,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do it.
Okay.
Now I might have said something similar back then, but I think if anything, when I go to try to do a sequel or something, that's when I might make improvements and stuff like that. Because regardless of how good or not it is, I'm still gonna be able. It's still gonna be modularized, so I can still plug stuff in and easily build levels. If I need to change, that's what matters in a lot of ways.
Okay.
If I tried to take the game the way it existed and do a sequel, it'd be a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, great, I have a bunch of artwork that I can salvage,
right?
And then everything else has to be rewritten completely. Right. So it's not going to be that way anymore. The enemy manager is, it's the enemy manager. Like right. I can't imagine replacing that with anything else. It's just irreducibly complex.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and that is something I think about. Like, if I know more later on, then what?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing that like kind of gets me concerned. But I think if you kind of stick to what you're doing right now, and then you're able to get back into like the level design and stuff once all the kind of Frankenstein thing is finished.
I think in the last couple years especially, I've come to the mindset that I need to address stuff when there's a problem. Okay. And if there's not a problem, don't.
Okay.
That could be a visual problem. That could be, I think this looks bad, or I think this visual element doesn't communicate information to the player well.
Okay.
That's still a problem.
Sure.
Or a straight up bug or something like that, or performance issues. Those are problems that need to be addressed. And if I just don't like my code anymore, that's not a good enough reason to go and redo a whole thing.
Right.
So I have to be disciplined.
Okay.
But yeah, that's...
Because it seems like it could fall into like sort of distraction territory.
Right.
Or almost like not really feature creep, but just kind of...
constantly improving yourself to death.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like you never put anything out there. And I've heard devs talk about this kind of thing.
Oh, it happens. Yeah.
Where it's like you real. Just gotta ship it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's real. And yeah, I think the rule should be address problems. And if there's not a problem, just because it could be better is not a good enough reason.
Right. All right, we're going to jump into some news topics. But first, I want to talk about, we had mentioned maybe a month and a half ago that the Nintendo Switch was, the successor to the Nintendo Switch, I should say, would be announced or unveiled or teased or something by Nintendo in the week or so leading up to the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well, the Game Developer Conference has begun.
Yeah.
And it's already happening. And Nintendo never announced anything.
Yep.
So obviously this kind of puts a little bit of
a doubt on our credibility.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were just reporting what everyone else was reporting.
That's true.
For our listeners.
Man, I got like probably 10 emails from GDC. Are you coming? Or
really?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
They send so many
Well, if only
emails.
they'd make it a little more affordable, you'd be coming.
For real.
Instead of like $1,000.
Yeah, at minimum.
So the sources that initially announced, or not announced, but said that Nintendo would be unveiling it in the lead up to GDC, said that that essentially Nintendo has internally delayed the Nintendo Switch. It's now no longer releasing in 2024, but is now targeting an early 2025
You said
release
the Nintendo
date.
Switch. You mean
The successor to the Nintendo Switch, which is probably the Nintendo Switch 2.
Probably.
Is now targeting an early 2025 release.
So these sources are investors?
No. These are like insiders
Okay.
that have connections to developers and people and publishers and things like that who have been right about a lot of things. Yeah. But when an insider releases information, people with credibility too.
Yeah.
And something doesn't pan out, it doesn't necessarily make them
liars.
Yeah.
The direction changed.
Yeah.
I
mean, the reason Nintendo hasn't announced it yet was because Nintendo knew there was a possibility that it would get delayed.
Yeah.
So that's why they didn't say anything yet.
Yeah.
But the insiders didn't know that Nintendo knew there was a possibility it would get pushed back. From the insiders' perspective, it seemed pretty set in stone that it was happening.
Right.
And maybe those meetings at GDC are still happening this year.
Oh yeah.
But they're just not publicly talking about it yet because there's no need for Nintendo to publicly talk about it yet.
Right.
The only reason Nintendo wants to publicly talk about it is when they want to get consumers, gamers,
to get involved.
Yeah, to get involved, and they're not ready. They don't have the marketing together yet.
Right.
To do it now.
This is why they hate leaks.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Because it just makes problems for them. It sets up expectations. People will be blaming Nintendo over this.
Right.
Nintendo, you were supposed to reveal it.
We didn't say anything.
Yeah. It's we've never said a word.
Yeah.
Then it creates problems with investors too when investors start looking at those leaks as gospel. Oh great, my stock's about to jump.
Right.
And then it doesn't.
They're gonna sue.
Then they start selling. And then they're like, oh, forget it. So now what's interesting, by putting it in an early 2025 kind of area, they're probably, I would guess, looking at March.
Mm-hmm.
Then the original Nintendo Switch launched in March of 2017. So if we look at that kind of PR cycle that the original Switch went through, Nintendo didn't publicly unveil the original Switch form factor and functionality, how it would work, the whole docking, undocking, Joy-Con thing, until October of 2016. So it's possible we could be waiting up until probably at least that long before we as the public know anything about the Switch Successor, unless maybe Nintendo knows that something major is going to leak online. Then maybe they have to make a move and beat that to press.
Right. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, it does. Where their hand is kind of forced early.
Right.
But yeah, we could possibly be waiting until as late as October of this year now.
Yeah. So you mentioned investors. I'm gonna just talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
I actually went ahead and bought about $2,000 in Nintendo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm gonna sit on that, and we're just gonna see how it goes.
Okay. This is an interesting experiment.
So we're invested, and we're gonna just see. So far, and I look back at the history of Nintendo stock since 2000, because that's about as far back as I can look.
Okay.
It's stayed pretty much the same.
Steady.
Yeah.
Now, do you see spikes when hardware comes out?
Yeah, I assume that's where the spikes are at.
Okay.
But the spikes are not very high.
Okay.
They kind of have a very mainline price point, and it goes up a couple dollars and it goes down a couple dollars.
Okay.
But for the most part, it's a pretty I don't want to call it stagnant, but
right.
Just
is it keeping
steady.
up with inflation though?
Well, all stocks kind of do.
Okay.
They do that naturally.
I mean, if it was worth $30 in 2000 and now they're worth $30 today.
Oh yeah, you do see a upward slope.
Okay, gotcha.
Of course, that's normal. You're gonna see that with everyone.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I remember. Not to get into the whole GameStop thing, but remember there was that time where GameStop stocks were $4.
Yeah.
Right, and then and then with PlayStation 5 comes out, Xbox Series X comes out, and then they jumped up to $15, $16. that's when a lot of people who bought it earlier in the year sold.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a whole other thing happened with GameStop, which we're not going to get into.
Right.
And sent their price to astronomical levels.
Right. Yeah, that was a little different situation.
Yeah.
That was mostly driven by like online, memes and stuff. But this, I mean, we have an unannounced console that we know is coming.
Yeah.
And we're going to just see how the Nintendo stock does.
Okay.
And we're holding off until basically they announce it and start showing it. I don't know if I want to hold on to it too much after like the console launches. I might sell it right before.
Yeah, you might want to ride that like high.
Yeah.
And then offload it.
Or offload it right before it drops.
Because even though Nintendo Switch has done very well, it's like investors are still like weird with Nintendo.
Yeah.
Like their stock is, like you said, it's just kind of like steady.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just steady. And even around the time that the Switch like outsold everything, it went up like $2.
Yeah.
That's
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. So yeah, that's where we're at with the Nintendo Switch Successor. We'll keep you updated when there's more, rumors that are legitimate.
I'll also want to point out this is nothing we say on this podcast is financial advice.
Oh, definitely.
And I'll probably be repeating that.
Right. If you ever update us on your...
Exactly.
Yeah, this is something you're doing of your own free will.
Yeah, this is just...
for fun.
An experiment to see for research and stuff.
Okay, so we've got another kind of leaky story. This one is about the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Yeah.
Supposedly, the specs of the PlayStation 5... Oh my goodness. The specs of the PlayStation 5 Pro have leaked. This information comes from Insider Gaming, who says that the information was shared with them as Sony has been using its developer portal to distribute information about the mid-generation console to more third-party developers. So essentially, some third-party developers have corroborated and shared documents with Insider Gaming that show information about the PS5 Pro and what the specs of the console are. And so we're going to get into some of that now. Some of this might be a little above our head, but Rick's going to do his best
I'll do this part.
Lay this out in layman's terms for us.
So rendering is going to be 45% faster than the PS5, which, whether that's needed or not, is a whole other conversation.
Okay.
The PS5 is...
I know, like, the whole idea of a PS... Let's talk about that real quick. Okay. The whole idea of a PS5 Pro even needing to exist...
Yeah.
Like...
I'm scratching my head.
Yeah, like, I guess this is for, like, the... I wish I was a PC gamer, but I have a PS5, so let me...
How big is that market, though?
I don't know. I mean, well, the PS4 Pro... I was there on day one for the PS4 Pro.
That made more sense.
It felt like it needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the PS4 was, the PS4. The Pro helped. I don't know that $500 helped or $400 helped.
But I mean, are we going to start seeing games having like all these bonus features like we did with PS4 Pro? Like, I don't know if you remember, but games were coming out and they'd have like 4K textures that were exclusive for playing it on PS4 Pro.
Right.
Like, are we going to see that kind of stuff?
Well, maybe we have some hints at maybe some of that in these specs here.
That's true. All right. So rendering, like I said, 45% faster, 2 to 3 times ray tracing, times 4 in some cases. So ray tracing has to do with lighting and normal mapping and really just how light plays off of normal maps and stuff in games. Lighting is a combination of a lot of different components. Ray tracing is one of them.
Okay.
So that has to do with graphics and lighting in particular. 33.5 teraflops compared to the PS5's 10.28 teraflops.
So that seems like a pretty big jump.
Yeah, that's like more than 3 times. Yeah. So a teraflop is basically a tera is a trillion, and that's flops refers to the points in space, basically, like a vector 3.
Right.
So XYZ value. Now this includes vertices on 3D meshes. This is going to include vertices on colliders. Anything to do with collision is going to use, flops. It's going to, terrain editors use a lot. Like, there's a lot of points on those. So 33.5 trillion is what it can handle.
So I gotta wonder though, if games still have to be designed for the base PS5,
yeah,
will any games really even be
right.
targeting more than?
That's a great question.
So I guess they would have to somehow bake in extra features that would activate
so
like the PS5 Pro.
Getting back to what I was proposing, maybe this is the path that games offer more with the PS5 Pro.
I guess maybe there's like more dense environments and things like that.
Yeah, more foliage
right.
and stuff. Maybe more geometry in the terrain and other parts of the game. I can't see them doing multiple character models for every character and NPC in the game. I mean, I guess these AAA studios would do something like that maybe, but that's a lot of work, dude.
Yeah.
That's a crazy, stupid
Maybe
amount
there's
of work.
just some kind of easy way to...
Yeah, maybe it could be done just with software.
Right.
At this point. I haven't used any tools like that, but doing that by hand, oh man. PSSR, which is PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution Upscaling. So this, I believe, is the upscaling of textures, right?
So it says it's an upscaling / anti-aliasing solution with support for up to 8K is planned
for a future SD software development kit version. So with this is basically what they introduced with PS4. The concept is
right.
So this upscaling basically takes a texture and in PS4 Pro's case could upscale it to 4K. And
so a lot of games are still faking 4K
right
for TVs. So this is just like sounds like a better way to do that to make it
it says it can artificially upscale it to 8K.
Right.
I can't imagine looking at anything in 8K. That seems ridiculous.
I mean, 8K TVs are probably starting to happen.
Yeah, you're probably right. But anyways, this is kind of an older concept with PS4 Pro, but we're getting more with the upscaling of textures and anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing being the fix for upscaling. So, if you upscale something, it's going to get all pixelated and stuff. Anti-aliasing,
smooth it out. Yeah.
Anti-aliasing is basically the anti-pixelation of an image. Custom machine learning architecture AI accelerator supporting 300 TOPS of 8-bit computation. So,
and then 67 teraflops of 16-bit floating point.
Okay. So what this is talking about is so a top is a Tera operation process. Shoot.
Yeah, I think it said when we were researching some of these terms, it said that it was like the theoretical
I know what it is.
Computations.
I know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly it stands for.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's an operation. So, 300 trillion operations.
Okay.
Of 8-bit computation. So, if you think of this is going to get into programming. I'm going to try to be as layman as possible.
Okay.
But so in code we have integers and floats. Both are number values. Okay. An integer is 4 bits, which is just a number, right? A whole number. And a float can be a decimal. A float is 8 bits.
Okay.
So that would be an operation. As it sits in memory, right? That value. We have 300 trillion of those with the PS5 Pro. So available.
Right. So this has to do with its AI accelerator. Now, do you notice here where it says 67 teraflops of 16-bit floating point?
Yeah.
67 is double the 33.5 teraflops we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So something about this AI accelerator that's going to be part of the hardware.
This is going to get a little complex, but I do understand it.
Okay.
So the 16-bit floating point, a vector 3 floating point is 16 bits. They're always 16 bits.
Okay.
Unless there's a fourth value in some cases. I think those are 32 bits. But anyways, the AI accelerator component of this, we talked about a company way long ago, episodes back, probably episode 2 or 3 or somewhere in there, called iSize, that got bought up by Sony.
Right.
This, I believe, is their work being implemented in some capacity.
Okay.
Into this AI accelerator.
Well, iSize, if I'm remembering correctly,
yeah,
specifically worked on like using AI tools to like deliver like bandwidth savings for like video streaming.
This is that same concept, just a different implementation of it.
So you think they may have some involvement with this?
Yeah, or their software was gleaned by Sony and repurposed by their developers. But what it's doing here is using AI to upscale the capacity of the floating point capacity available in these.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How much like faking it there is now with these machines.
I see. I have a problem with that. I think that's just, not to insult you, but I think that's an ignorant like understanding of AI.
Okay.
The faking it.
Well, like with the upscaling.
Right. Well, the whole game is fake.
Right.
If you want to get really real.
Sure.
So we're using AI software. We're using scripts to take a sample and multiply it, easily without having the CPU work hard. That's all this is doing.
Yeah, I remember there being like discussions, like especially when the PS4 Pro first came out, and all this upscaling technology was kind of new
I remember how controversial.
Yeah, people were like, "Oh, so they're just giving me like 1080p, but they're upscaling it." You know,
and like, I think
a fake 4K image.
I think I was on the wrong side of that debate when that happened, because that was back in what, 2016 ish.
I mean, if it looks like it, then it may as well be it, right?
I can't get behind that because streaming is not the same. To me, like, it's not the same experience. It's you're not having the same experience. You're not putting the disc in. You're not owning the disc.
Well, I'm not talking about streaming.
Yeah, I know you're not, but like you said, if it looks like it might as well be it. And I'm using streaming as an example.
Oh, okay. I was just talking about the upscaling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of just upscaling, the whole game is fake, so calling upscaling fake doesn't make sense to me.
It's just another tool.
Yeah, it's just another tool that's making a thing happen on screen.
And so what if the artist didn't draw it in 8K? But it's still displaying in 8K, so...
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe it was the artist's choice to use an AI as part of the art.
Right. I mean, this buzzword, AI, this is something that's already been used prior.
Right.
This kind of upscaling technology.
Yeah.
Now everything is just being slapped with it. So when they announce it, they can be like, with built-in AI.
Yeah. So let's take a step back and talk about that a little bit. We're in a time now where our current buzzwords in the air are buzzwords that have a long history.
Yeah.
If we think back to like 2010, 2011, the big buzzword on products and stuff used in marketing was the cloud, the cloud.
Yeah, the cloud.
It has cloud compatibility. All that is a server.
Yeah, just
with multiple
else.
points of access, and that But before that, you never heard the word cloud as like some big thing. Right now, we have VR and AI.
Yeah.
Now, you've heard both of those terms in movies, in science fiction, going all the way back to probably the 50s. I don't know.
In some cases, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot that people are probably, when they hear the word AI or they hear VR, there's a lot that they're probably assigning to it, putting on it.
Yeah.
In their mind. And, AI has always been represented like an idea of artificialness and syntheticness, and I think people are just going with that, kind of prejudice that's already been established. But really all it is another tool in the software that's taking what's there and doing a thing with it. And that's the artist's choice to use that tool.
Yeah.
We've had tools that make things easier. We have, electric brushes and stuff like that, that people dude, it'd be crazy to see an art piece with an electric toothbrush, like a painting or something.
Oh, you should delete that from the episode.
Yeah, you're right. Anyways, this, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Buzzwords.
I guess, I'm not like trying to come down on it.
Mm-hmm.
I just mean like, I feel like this is something they were already using, this kind of tech, this kind of software, this AI upscaling has already existed, but now that like it's a buzzword, they want to like use it, Yeah,
they weren't calling it AI.
Well, I remember in like but like I remember in the 90s we'd be like, oh, turn on AI bots, Like I'm playing like a GoldenEye. Oh, turn on the AI.
Yeah, right. Because that was AI.
Right.
And the ghosts in Pac-Man are AI.
Right.
It's all it means is artificial intelligence.
Right. So it's like it wasn't that big of a deal when we said it back then.
Right. But now with I'm gonna blame Alexa and Siri and all these for the new wave of ideas surrounding
because they talk.
Yeah, and they can generate information, and they're learning, and it's machine learning, and all these other buzzwords.
Well, supposedly, like the digital assistants aren't AI-ified yet, like truly AI-ified. Like they haven't given them.
They're not generative, I guess.
Right. Yeah, they haven't given that kind of capability yet. But I think that's coming very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a bunch of people latch onto it and make it their identity and stuff, and when they had zero background in any of this kind of stuff.
Okay, so Insider Gaming also said that dev kits have been going out to first-party studios since September of 2023, so not that long ago, really.
So,
and third-party developers have apparently been getting hold of it since January of this year. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that's not going to be everybody. That's probably going to be very select third parties. But supposedly more and more of this information is rolling out to, I guess, more levels of people within PlayStation's developer ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Of which there are definitely multiple tiers.
Yeah. Like, PlayStation's probably not prioritizing, like, true indies, with these kinds of like dev kits and that stuff quite yet.
I can say that they're not.
Yeah. So and test kits are apparently going to become available to developers pretty soon as well. Now, a test kit, for those of you that don't know, is basically it looks like retail hardware.
It is a retail piece of hardware. Yeah. It's just fitted with the developer software. Yeah.
Right. And as usual, take all what we said with a grain of salt. There seem to be some credible sources with Insider Gaming story here, but
multiple sources, because they must have heard from someone from a AAA studio and someone from like a AA studio.
Yeah, this could all very well be real, but And, if test kits are coming out and this is accurate, nothing's really going to be changing then.
Right.
Unless somehow false info just got, mistakenly circulated,
Right.
I always wonder if, like, Sony feeds wrong information to people they might suspect of, like, leaking information. So then if that information gets out,
to blow up in their face,
they know that it's like, okay, it's this person who leaked it.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be patient, wait for the official word. If this is supposedly coming out this year, like this fall, so it won't be long before Sony starts talking about PS5 Pro.
I mean, from a technological standpoint, everything I described with the AI accelerator and all that stuff is a big deal, like technologically speaking. I just don't understand what games are going to use it. And do we need that much more power at this point? Now you can come out and say, well, Naughty Dog's certainly going to take advantage of this new power.
Yeah.
And I can say, sure, they are. Who else? Because
and not only that,
a new console for one game is not like
Naughty Dog has yet to even put out a true PS5 original.
They are a first party Sony studio, so they probably had information way ahead.
Right. Yeah. Now, I mean, are we going to get one new PS5 game from Naughty Dog? Hopefully.
Right.
But with how long development time takes now.
Right.
I mean, Insomniac just put out Spider-Man 2 last year. Their next big game, whatever, Spider-Man 3 or the new IP that they're working on, is probably a PlayStation 6 game, possibly.
Right.
Especially that new IP, if I had to guess.
Right. Is this console officially announced?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
So, I'm thinking when they do announce it, we're going to hear from Naughty Dog immediately.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we will... we know that they've said they're not releasing any new big tentpole games this year.
Right.
Nothing like God of War, nothing like Spider-Man 2.
Right, but Last of Us or something like that wouldn't be. It's an
basically no. Anything in any existing franchise, they basically said none of our big major franchises are launching a new game this year.
Okay.
That's what they said.
Okay.
So they told investors straight up, don't expect anything like that this year.
Yeah.
Now, there might be some other little surprises, and that doesn't mean that they can't announce something of that caliber. It's just not going to release this fiscal year.
Right.
So, yeah, you're probably right. Whenever they do show off PS5 Pro, it's probably going to be alongside some big announcement kind of game.
Right. Yeah, they're going to show off... They're going to probably couple it with, like, a Naughty Dog trailer or something.
All right, our next story is about Sony pausing production of PlayStation VR 2. This story broke last night via Bloomberg. They're pausing production as of further units of PlayStation VR 2 as excess stock is sitting on store shelves around the world. The PlayStation VR 2 launched in February of 2023 and is regarded as being a very high-end headset. It had very good reviews, too.
Yeah.
But with a $549 USD price tag, the cost of the headset is more than the price of the console required to make use of the peripheral.
You're right.
So the PlayStation 5 is $499.
I mean, that's not like that's the first time that's ever happened.
No, but when PlayStation VR 1 was fairly affordable, it was $300.
Yeah.
For PSVR 1, and the console itself that you had to buy was like $400 to $300 depending on which one you had.
Right.
So it was seen as a very cost-effective way to get into VR gaming.
Right.
But now PlayStation 5 is a higher-end product, or at least that's what they want you to think of it as.
Right.
And so they want you to think of PSVR 2 as a higher-end product as well.
Right. Which it is.
It is.
Everything I've heard, like, it's way better than PSVR 1.
But there's a problem. Sony has not supported it at all. Beyond one first-party title that was available at launch, Horizon Call of the Mountain, which is like sort of a spin-off of the Horizon series.
Yeah, right.
as of now, the public hasn't even been made aware by Sony of any other first-party games, even in development.
Mm-hmm.
For all we know, there is nothing else being in development by Sony.
Right.
For all we know, Sony has moved on and is just hoping that third-party sales will make PSVR 2 a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
there's a lot to infer.
Yeah. Something that might have helped them is if PSVR 1 games were backwards compatible.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
That was stupid. That's a stupid move.
I mean, I understand the technological hurdle that was maybe there.
Yeah.
Because of
the cord and everything.
Well, no, PSVR 2 is also tethered.
Okay.
Yeah, they call it. So it doesn't. That limitation is still there. So while a lot of VR headsets have gone untethered, where either there's some kind of streaming between the computer to the headset,
yeah,
or it's entirely contained within the headset wholly.
Right.
PSVR 2 did not do that. They stuck to being a tethered headset. But their games couldn't be backwards compatible. At least they explained it because of the way the hand controllers worked with PSVR 1. It used the old PlayStation Move wands that had like the light up bulb at the top.
Yeah, right.
Which then a camera would track those bulbs and those lights on the headset and on.
Yeah, it had like tracking and stuff.
Which basically created a way for Sony to make a cost effective VR headset.
Right.
So, but by doing that, they've essentially excluded all those games from being possible to play on the new VR headset. So if you were someone who was really into like PlayStation's VR games, you would have to like constantly be unplugging and plugging in the different VR headsets, which is a lot of work, let me tell you.
Yeah, I imagine.
So it's kind of like Sony has like plopped it out there and just kind of moved on from it. The same way they did with the Vita.
We already said that they're doing this because of how much stock they have sitting on shelves. That means it's not selling. And that's probably why they're pulling back.
I mean, but you know how you make it sell more?
Yeah.
Release games that people would want to play for
They did that with the Vita. They did the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Vita got more support than
It
this.
did initially, but I'm saying that like this is the same. Like the Vita ended up going the way it did because of what they did.
Yeah,
and that's what they're doing here.
I mean, the Vita had the memory card thing too.
Yeah, it had problems. It wasn't
I guess the VR headset has a price problem itself.
It didn't help that the graphics unit was more powerful than the CPU unit.
Yeah,
that which is backwards from consoles.
So the International Data Corporation reports that Sony has shipped approximately 1.7 million units to retailers around the world, while having produced more than 2 million assembled units of the headset. That would mean there are more than 300,000 headsets sitting around in a warehouse waiting to be shipped. Like Sony hasn't even given them to retailers yet.
Yeah, right.
But retailers already have plenty of stock. So, I mean, they found themselves in, like, a situation you don't want to be in.
Right. It's just not selling.
Yeah, like, it just must be trickling at this point.
Right.
I mean, what would it take for me to... If it was, like, maybe... I mean, now that I know Sony's in this situation...
Yeah, I might wait for it to go on sale.
Oh, yeah. I'm just like... I'm not going to wait for it to go on sale. I'm going to wait for it to go on clearance.
Yeah.
You know? Like, because $100 off, whoop-de-doo. I know they can afford to go lower because they got unsold stock that they don't even know what to do with.
Yeah, it's sad.
If they let this just continue like this, it'll be shameful.
Yeah.
Like I would never trust an experimental peripheral from Sony ever again.
Well, this is what they have historically done. So there's precedent that they will just move on.
Just move on from it. Just quietly move on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not what I want to see.
I mean, I would say, compared to the Vita, which, for all that you want to say, it did have strong sort of third-party niche support.
Yeah.
From, like, a lot of, like, Japanese developers.
Right.
You know, not so much the Western developers as much. But PSVR, I don't think there's... I think there aren't as many. I mean, like when you make a game for PSVR, it's not necessarily a game that you can play normally, you know?
Sometimes it is. Um, I mean, a lot of games kind of have VR mode.
Sure, you
You
can
know.
have a tacked on VR mode of some kind. Like No
Yeah.
Man's Sky, for example,
Right.
like they added in a whole VR mode. Gran
Um,
Turismo added in a whole VR mode. I
I
guess
mean,
that is one other example of first party support for
yeah.
PlayStation VR 2. But that wasn't like a whole like released new title.
Right.
It's like a free update for people who already own the game.
Right. I think games can be built with VR mode in mind, but still be playable on, like, the main hardware.
Well, here's something that's interesting. Insomniac Games, before they were purchased by Sony, they were making a bunch of VR games for Meta, for Facebook
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And so they had like five or six, or maybe not five or six, maybe like three or four, like completed VR games that were like pretty acclaimed as well.
Yeah.
And so people were like, oh, Insomniac, they have pedigree developing like VR games. They could port their VR games.
Mm-hmm.
They can make a new VR game. But like we saw everything Insomniac is working on for like the next decade. Like we saw their roadmap.
Right.
No VR games present on that roadmap.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Like you have people with experience and skills in that field, and Sony is internally seeing that they're more valuable doing something else than making a VR game for their own first party headset.
Yeah.
If that's not damning.
Yeah, that's not a good move or a good look or
and
whatever.
they closed PlayStation's London studio.
Yeah, which was also working on VR.
Well, previously worked on VR. We don't know if their new project supported it, but that's more VR talent down the drain.
I'm gonna say this now, and I don't think I've ever really said this publicly, but my intention is my next title being VR.
Right.
So I would have targeted PSVR 2 or whatever is next, but this is bad news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's probably not a good idea for you to target another system seeing that kind of resistance from its creators.
Yeah. Be in the same situation.
Yeah, with where the store is closing and something like that again. No thanks. So I don't know what Sony. I mean, I know what Sony should do. They should have a studio dedicated to creating smallish AA VR games.
Yeah.
Like, put out a new 10-hour experience every year.
You put out this super expensive, highly developed product.
Yeah.
And you're gonna just let it die? Like, I don't understand.
It's like, I'm not sure what they expected to happen, that, like, third parties would just...
Okay, we put out the hardware. We're good to go.
Now you guys make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sad. And this Horizon Call of the Mountain game is, it's a small experience to begin with, as a lot of VR games are, which is understandable. But why have they not created like a killer app for it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Bring
PlayStation Home back.
The technology allows for so much.
There's possibilities are like endless.
Like, why are we just squandering that?
I don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, I would agree with you. That's what they should do, is have just a VR studio internally, just working on support for their VR console.
I mean, they have 1.5 million people who've purchased this thing.
Yeah.
Like, give them something to buy, guys.
Right. Which is abysmal for hardware. Like,
it's not a great number, no. But if you can convince all those people to buy one game, you can make it worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then from there, you get word of mouth, and then things just... But you can't just tack on VR modes to stuff.
Yeah,
and expect that to
you have to give people a reason to buy it, Yeah. And right now there isn't one.
No.
And that sucks. They've been so quiet with PSVR 2 since the beginning of it. Like, I didn't even know it came out when it came out.
Yeah, it's been pretty I think Sony... I think there was like initially a lot because PSVR 1 was kind of like a sleeper hit for them.
Right.
Like it sold quite well, made a lot of money off of it, and they introduced a lot of people to VR for the first time.
Right.
And then VR2 seemingly took longer to come out than like people had been hoping. Like it wasn't until like 3 years into the PlayStation 5's life cycle, and then it wouldn't be backwards compatible with PSVR 1 games. I mean, that already kind of shoots itself in the foot.
Yeah.
And then there's like, okay, we got one game for you guys, and then we're just gonna let third parties kind of carry the rest of this forward forever. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, the feeling I had, like as a consumer who was considering purchasing PlayStation VR 2, was not one of like, oh, they're really confident in this.
Yeah.
You know, like they've got something cooking. If they had something cooking, they would have showed it to us.
Yeah. Right.
You know, they wouldn't have left us wondering
what
they're doing this. Oh, look, I'm a Horizon character in a canoe. Like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you showed off. Like, you can do better than that, guys.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, we got one final story for everyone. And unfortunately, we're talking about another death in the character designer community. So we had Akira Toriyama a couple weeks ago, and then just last night it was announced that the character designer behind many games in the Tales of series from Bandai Namco, Mutsumi Inomata, has died. So Mutsumi Inomata, character designer, animator, illustrator, and mangaka, has died at the age of 63 on March 10, 2024. The immediate cause of her death was not disclosed, beyond that it happened suddenly. News broke on Inomata's Twitter account. Her sister apparently gained access to it and posted a message announcing the news. And so I'm going to read the message. And I believe this is machine translated, so it might be a little rough around the edges. It happened so suddenly. There were even rough sketches left unfinished, but she must be drawing them now in heaven. Surrounded by her beloved cats, she should be continuously creating characters with cute and strong eyes. We express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who loved and supported Mutsumi Inomata. We sincerely hope for your continued love and support in the future, and hereby notify you with deep respect. The funeral was held privately with close relatives only. As per the deceased wishes, we respectfully decline any condolences, monetary gifts, offering, floral tributes, or any other form of condolences. We kindly ask for your understanding. So Mutsumi worked a lot in anime and manga, doing illustrations before getting involved with games. But her first game credit is designing the cover art and character for the Sharp X1 game known as Alpha.
Right. So PC game.
Yeah, a PC game. She was most famously in the gaming world known as the character designer for many games in the Tales of series. So this includes Tales of Destiny, Eternia, Destiny 2, Rebirth, Tempest, Innocence, Hearts, Graces, Exilia, and also contributed to other games in the series such as Berseria in 2016. Her art style has like a very unique look to it. It almost has like a juvenile kind of look to it, but with
her
like
color palette is
like colored pencils. It's very like 80s Japan.
80s anime.
There's a style of manga that's like meant for girls. It's called like shouju.
Okay, I think I've heard.
And they draw like characters with like really big eyes.
Yeah, that's what.
That kind of like sparkle and glimmer, and you see that even in like her Tales of design work as well. One thing, kind of slightly off topic, is like even though the Tales of series has had multiple character designers, there is sort of a shared kind of design philosophy between them.
Right.
Probably direction from Bandai Namco. Because like I had always thought it was like primarily one character designer.
Yeah.
But upon Mutsumi's death and doing more research, I discovered that, there's like two main designers, with Mutsumi being one of them, and then in more recent years, there's been a couple other character designers as well. Mutsumi's actually done the designs for more Tales of games than any other of the character designers.
Yeah.
And the Tales of series is from Bandai Namco, and she proved to be a close partner for them in more than just the Tales series. She also worked on Tekken games such as Tekken 5 and Tekken Dark Resurrection. Tekken boss Katsuhiro Harada shared a memory of her on Twitter. It's just a brief statement from him. I'm deeply shocked to hear that Inomata has died. Inomata sensei used to come into my office and play games with me. She was gone too soon. Rest in peace, sensei. She also drew illustrations and designed covers for many Dragon Quest novels and manga. Her Dragon Quest illustrations were collected in an art book in 1994. It's not known beyond her sister if she had other family or children. It sounds like she had cats, though.
Yeah.
But rest in peace.
Yeah. That another character artist.
Yeah.
Is gone. Crazy that she also worked on Dragon Quest.
I know, right? Yeah, I was like, wow. So another notable name in the series has now died. And also fairly young, especially for a woman, only 63 years old.
Yeah. Again, we don't know the cause of the death, other than it was sudden.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say here. It's the Tales of character artist, the main one, and yeah, just sucks. Another Japanese JRPG franchise.
I think the first time I remember hearing about a character designer that died was a few years back, and it was the Golden Sun character designer, whose name is escaping me right now. I think that was maybe 2018, 19, 20. And since then, I hadn't really been seemingly affected. There haven't really been a lot of character designers that, I admired their work dying, which was nice, you know?
Right.
But, they're getting older now.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy to think that these people are now in their 60s plus.
Yeah. These are all the teams and developers and stuff that started on the NES and the Famicom and those consoles, TurboGrafx 16, etc.
They're all in their 20s then, and now they're all in their 60s.
Yeah.
Or 70s even.
Yeah. And some people in the industry are even older.
Yeah.
But that's just, it's the way it goes. Same thing happens in like music and that kind of thing. But even then, like she was young.
Yeah.
So sad. Rest in peace. End transmission.